All right, y'all. I'm so excited, and I just can't hide it. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is VooDoo Val, and I am going to be your host for the second pro tip stream for the day, and I'm super pumped about it. We're going to dive into the Photoshop timeline, and we're going to take a little walk around. We're going to look through the video timeline stuff, and I'm going to show you kind of the rundown on some of the cool stuff that you can do with keyframing in there, some tips and tricks to kind of get you through your projects. If you are not new to the timeline, this is a great way to kind of scrub up on your skills, but if you've never used the Photoshop timeline before and you'd like to see what it's all about, this is the stream for you. I use the Photoshop timeline all the time when I'm not using the fresco animation now, and it is a lot of fun. Also, please keep in mind we are going to be jumping into the Discord after this, which I'm pumped about. I think I actually have, do I have, yes, join the conversation on Discord, bit.ly/ps Discord, right after the show, because after we dive into what we're doing in the timeline today, you guys can jump into the chat and actually talk with me, and like literally talk with me. I would love to hear from you folks. I want to hang out. I want you guys to ask me questions. Let me answer those questions. It's going to be fun. So let me pop over here. We're going to dive straight into what we've got planned for today. And I do have a little bit of a pre-made project for you just to go through, and I'm going to show you what it's all about. So if you should be able to see what I've got going on. I want to kind of bump myself over to the other side of the screen here. Okay, so this is my Photoshop, and when you dive into Photoshop, you probably won't see your Photoshop timeline. You're going to have to go up to Window and scroll down to Timeline to open that up. And what that is going to do is it's opened up a timeline, basically, as you can see over here. All of my layers and everything for this project I've got actually shows up if I bump over here. Right here in my timeline, you can see I can scroll through there now and take a look at all of the different layers that I have. I can open up the little caret windows for each of them, and I'm able to actually transform, change the opacity, change the style, and all that good stuff here, and animate this on a video timeline. I've got a little playhead here that I can scroll back and forth, and you can see there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. And so what I would like to do is I've got this interesting little diamond shape, and I am going to actually open up some little doors, okay? And we're gonna have some cool magic-y stuff happen with that little, this is supposed to be some kind of gemstone. Use your imaginations. I just wanted something to look pretty for our pro tip stream. We're gonna have some cool magic-y stuff happen with our gemstone, and then we will close the doors again. And we're going to do this all by transforming our pieces and putting some keyframes in to move them around along our timeline. We are going to alter the opacity of our different layers according to a keyframe points here and there on our timeline, so that it's fading in and out of view. And we're also going to edit the styles, the blend modes and things of our layers according to keyframes. So the first thing I'm going to do is, as you can see, I've got like upper and lower layers here, which I will just hide so you can see that there is a difference between having that on and having that off. And these two layers are set to difference. And what I'm going to do is I am going to slide these away to kind of reveal our piece in a different color scheme underneath here. And we are going to slide them out, and then we are going to set some style keyframes to transform them back to a normal blending mode, so that when they go away, you can't see them, and by the time they come back, they're on a different blending mode. And you can do that very easily with the transform keyframe here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a transform keyframe just like that. I'm also going to I'm going to actually zoom out of my layer here just so that I can transform these easily, which is just Control or Command plus and minus keys just to zoom in and out. And with that keyframe placed, I am going to actually drag my little playhead here to a different point, and I'm going to Control or Command T on this upper cover here, and I'm just going to transform this out. And just a tip here, because I want this to be very smooth, I have like a triangle piece selected here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this bottom corner of our free transform box up with the top corner of our canvas, because I know that I will be able to pull that back into frame and move it out, and it'll be in the exact same place every time I do it. Just helps me a little bit with alignment. And I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that once I hit enter, that actually placed another transform keyframe, just like so. And then what I'm going to do is do the same thing with the other one. So I'll come over here to my lower cover, and we'll open that little caret menu right there. And I'm going to bring this back over here. You can see that slide now with that first one. I'm going to bring this back, and I'm going to hit the little stopwatch, add a transform keyframe here to this one. I'm going to bring my little playhead over here to line up with that second transformation for our first layer there. I will Control T or Command T if you're working on a Mac, and I'm just gonna free transform this out. And I've got my snapping grids on again, so it helps me with alignment. If you don't see the little pink snapping grids as you start moving things around, go ahead and hit Control or Command H on your keyboard, and it will reveal those to you. And then I'll hit enter, and you can see it adds another keyframe for me right there. So if we back this up and hit spacebar to play, boom, you can see it just does a nice little reveal right there. It's actually pretty darn nifty. Boom. And they're on blending modes, so it kind of not only reveals, but it changes the color of our project, which is actually pretty cool. Now, when we close the doors again, I want them to obscure everything that we see. And we can do that by changing them to a normal blending mode, because right now these layers are on difference. So all we have to do when we want to slide these back in is I will drag the playhead over here. We may end up moving these keyframes after a time, but I'll just drag it over here. And what I want to do is, let's actually start in the middle here. These are off camera, okay? So while they're off our canvas, we can actually add a style keyframe here, and we can just change that to normal. Boom. And we can do the same thing with our lower cover, all right? Add a style, and we can change that to normal. And then when we add more keyframes in to move them back into place, which we can do if we maybe come in like right here, we can add a transform keyframe. Again, let's go ahead and hit transform. I should be able to hit transform. Hold on, let me Control Z, make sure we're selected properly. I should be able to add another, one moment, let me see. There we go. I'm clicking the stopwatch, and what I need to do is click the actual keyframe button there. So I've added another keyframe, and I'm going to Control T, and then I'm just going to bring this back down, and I'm going to snap it right back into place on my canvas. I should be able to do that pretty darn easily. I'll zoom in and just make sure that this is in the right place here. It needs to bump over just a tiny bit. There we go. And I will... actually, you know what I needed to do before I moved that back is I place my keyframe and then move my playhead. That's what I needed to do. Boom. Then I will Control T. Gets a little crazy with keyframes up in here. All right, let's go ahead and place that back down. Boom. And then if I hit enter, it'll add me another keyframe back, and you can see that that is now normal. It's on a normal blending mode. So we'll do the same exact thing to the other one here. So I'll line this up with that keyframe, make sure we're selected on our lower cover. Make sure to press the keyframe button here and not the stopwatch there. So we'll go ahead and put a keyframe in, and then we'll move our playhead and line it up there with that second keyframe we added the second time to our other layer, and free transform. I'm going to go ahead and line this up. Boom. Just like that. We'll go ahead and hit enter, and it adds another keyframe for us. So then if I come back here to the very beginning and hit the space bar, it should actually, let's see, you know what? Let me make sure our style keyframe is working properly. Let's go ahead, let's leave our free transform. This is actually kind of a really great issue to run into, because if you've never used the Photoshop timeline, I'm going to go ahead and come up here and redo transform keyframe. If you've never used the timeline before, you probably will run into this issue, and while I hate to have mistakes in a live stream, this is actually an excellent opportunity to resolve the problem. So what I'm going to do is click that keyframe and hit delete. This is our style keyframe, and I'm going to come right back. So here we want to make sure that our layers are on difference, because that's what we started with. Boom. All right, so we've got both of our layers on difference yet again. So I want to have a style keyframe here, boom, and here, boom. So now I've marked my style keyframe. And then once they're off camera, then I can place a style keyframe. Let's turn them back to normal. And then it added a second keyframe to style for us. Okay, so now if we go ahead and play, it's difference, and then right here it changes, and then when it comes back, it should be, boom, there we go. All right. We are fixing issues on the fly. Which is great, because then if this happens to you, then you know why. So make sure you place that style keyframe right there at the beginning, so it knows it's starting from difference, and then right here is the change, and then as it slides back in, it will be a normal blend mode. So we've got these cool doors opening, and that's kind of neat. All right, I like it. I think it is cool. We've got the VooDoo Val colors right here, and then we change into, I don't know, some Andrew Hockrattle colors or some Wade Acuff colors right here. So we've got the two sides of Adobe Live going on. And another thing that I'd like to do, as I said, is we want to get some cool magical glowy craziness happening with our gemstone in the center here. And I'm going to do that just with a few layers that I have, which are just textured brush strokes with my soft round brush on a dissolve blend mode, which look a little something like this. I'm actually going to zoom into my canvas, and I've got my my burst layers right here, which I will scroll down. You can see I've got burst and I've got second burst, and these are literally just dots with texture on them. So what I'd like to do first is start with our burst. So we've got our creepy doors are shut, and then the creepy doors slide open, and by the time our creepy doors are totally open, where we can see everything on our canvas, I'd like for this little burst in here to expand, and we're going to do that with a transform keyframe as well. So let's go ahead and hit the transform keyframe on our burst, and then about here, I think I'd like for it to be a little bit larger. So I'm just going to go ahead and Control T, and I'm going to resize this so it's like pew, like that. You got to do the sound effects or it doesn't work. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK or Enter, so that it's just boom. So it opens, creepy doors open, our burst comes in, right? Then I'd like to add a second burst, but we're going to get a little fancy with this one. This one, we are actually going to use a little bit of opacity. So we've used transform, we've used the style keyframes, and now we're going to do the opacity keyframe, because this second burst is a very dark color. And I actually have it set, the layer, if I bump myself over to the other side of the screen, the layer in my layers panel for the second burst, the opacity is actually set to 0 already. So we want to actually fade it into existence, okay? And we're going to do that really quickly, just like so. So the second burst is set to 0% opacity. or opacity, however you say it, potato, potato. I'm going to go ahead and click the opacity keyframe here. I should be able to go ahead and click that, boom, and it adds a little opacity keyframe for me. And then I am going to move this just a little bit, and I am going to crank my opacity up like so. You can see it kind of just fades in a little dot there, and it adds another opacity keyframe for me. So as, ooh, you see that? You see how if I move that very slowly, I'm actually going to zoom in here so you can really see that. Kind of keep an eye on my time as well. Oh, we got plenty of time. We have plenty of time. As I, creepy doors are shut, creepy doors open, our first burst kind of bursts into existence. Then our little burst begins to appear, and then we're going to make that one expand as well. So we'll do a transform keyframe on that. So from this size, we will click our little stopwatch there and add a transform keyframe. And then I'm thinking about right here, we will actually want it to fade into a larger size. So we'll go ahead and Control T, and we will, boom, make that bigger, just like that. We'll go ahead and hit enter, so it gets bigger, and then we will very quickly make it smaller again. Now, keep in mind, as you're using these keyframes, the distance between these keyframes on the timeline is also going to take into consideration an amount of time. So this, you can see there's a certain amount of distance between it existing, it's kind of come into existence here, and then getting larger, and I want it to go away faster than it appeared. So I'm going to move it only about half the distance here, and then I am going to shrink it back down. We'll make it very small, just like that, and go ahead and hit enter, so you can see it gets larger and then disappears. So it just goes pew, pew. Again with the sound effects, gotta use the sound effects. And then we will fade that out of existence. We will go ahead and let's go ahead and add another opacity keyframe. So I'm going to turn the, let's see, hit that keyframe button right there. And then I am going to move it just slightly over, and I'm going to crank the opacity right back down. Boom, and it adds another opacity keyframe for us. And then we can zoom out our first burst. So let's go ahead and add a transform keyframe. Make sure our burst is selected there. Hit our transform, and then about here, we will shrink that back down out of existence. Make it disappear. Boom, just like that. And we'll hit enter, which adds another keyframe. So now let's go ahead, let's start from the very beginning, let's zoom out, and let's see what we got. I should be able to hit the spacebar, boom, all right. And it's gonna render a little bit, pew, and then that disappears, and then the regular door shut. Now, when you first start previewing what you're animating, you may notice that it's a little choppy. That's because the first time around, after you start an animation for the first time, or after you make a change, it's going to need to render, and you can kind of tell whether portions of it are rendered or not if you take a look at this little pinkish, a bluish green line up here will tell you if it has been pre-rendered or not. So now when I play it again, it will be nice and smooth. So it'll open, pew, disappear, and our doors will shut. All right. Let's see. I am going to, how much time do we have left? Oh, we got about 5 minutes. So I think what we can do is kind of touch on a little bit. We've done style keyframes, we've done the opacity keyframes, we've done the transform keyframes, and now another thing that I would like to talk about is some issues that you may run into, or things you might see differently than what you've seen on my screen as you kind of adventure into keyframing in the video timeline with Photoshop. So first thing, you'll notice if I make sure that my camera is not blocking my layers, you'll notice that the layers that I'm working with, the actual layers that I animated with today, are actually smart objects. So as you work with your layers, make sure to right click them and convert to smart object, because what shows is actually different depending on whether you're working with smart objects or not. So if I come back over here and kind of preview what you can see over here in my timeline on the left hand side, you'll see that these layers here that are smart objects, you get transform, opacity, and style. But if you look at the layers that are not, you get position, opacity, and style, which is slightly different. And another thing you can do here is, say you've started a project like I have here, where we've got, you know, creepy doors opening, all this cool stuff happening, and then we come to a close. You may actually realize you've got all this extra time, all this extra stuff happening in your timeline, and maybe you don't really need your project to be that long after all. One thing that you can do is grab the end of your little bracket here that encompasses the entirety of your animation project, and you can bump that all the way back here. And then if I go ahead and go to the very beginning and hit the space bar and play that, you'll see that it'll end there instead. It'll end there. And now the transition for this is very abrupt, and if you were working on this as a major project, you might add a lot more transitions, a lot more interesting things, so that it's not just like a big jumble of crazy colors and stuff flying everywhere. But you know, that's a very handy thing to know if you create a project and it's a little longer than you would like. Another thing is, as you come in here and work with the timeline, you can actually expand it, which is very, very helpful if you want to see more things here. You can also, similar to how you might see things in some of the other Adobe apps that focus on video editing or animation, you can also kind of shrink and expand just how much of your project you can see at once in your timeline, and you can scroll left and right so that you can really get a good visualization of what you're doing. And another thing is, you can actually come in here and move all of the keyframes individually. So if I wanted to close those doors a lot faster than you see initially here, if I wanted them to close sooner after the disappearance of our final little burst there, I can actually just grab them and bring them over. I could also make them close at different times by moving them totally off kilter from one another. I could actually make them close separately. So as you can see there, you can really get that visualization of it rendering out to show because I made a change. But now you can see I've just bumped them around, and I can kind of do whatever I want after I place them. So it is a lot of fun. You might get in here and feel a little bit overwhelmed once you start messing with keyframes and doing all of the different things in the timeline that you can do. But I would say, as just a word of advice, as somebody who's used the timeline for a long time, and somebody who actually was pretty scared of it when I first started using it, I've shown you a lot of different kinds of keyframes that you can put to use today, but start out with only one of them if you're new to this. You can jump into just the transform keyframes and start moving things left and right, up and down and around and all that good stuff, and just see how you like that. Another thing that I will say is, when you open your timeline, you may notice that it gives you an option for either a video timeline or a frame animation, and we're using the video timeline here. There's also frame animations that you can do, which we can talk a little bit about in the Discord, which I'm getting ready to jump over to. So if you folks would like to join me, if you'd like to jump in a voice chat with me, ask me any questions you may have, and dive into some more good design goodness, I would love for you to come over to the Photoshop Discord. We'll get a a link in the chat, which should be coming up pretty soon. Thank you so much, Wade, for posting that chat. Hello, Kyle. It's good to see you. But yeah, jump in the Discord. I'm going to answer any questions you have, but I'm going to get started with maybe some frame animation as well in the timeline if you'd like to see that. So I will see you folks over there. Adios, everyone.